Then at this time, I'll call to order the Port Authority for the City of St. Louis for its regularly scheduled meeting on July 11, 2024, held via Zoom. May we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Mason,
Present.
Commissioner Miller,
Present.
Commissioner Kay,
Present.
Alderman Cone,
There. Alderman, you're muted.
Yeah,
Morning.
we're just getting set. And we'll count that as a present.
okay, and Chair McBride.
Present. We have a quorum. We'll take up the minutes from the meeting held on June 13, 2024. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
I second.
Properly moved and seconded. May we have a roll call vote, please?
Commissioner Mason,
Aye.
Commissioner Miller,
I'm abstaining since I wasn't present.
Commissioner Kay,
Aye.
Alderman Cone,
Aye.
and Chair McBride.
Aye. And the minutes are approved. At this time, we'll take up Resolution 24 PT 18 relating to the Fifth Amendment to the contract with HDR Engineering. Susan, can you walk us through that, please?
Yes, good morning, everyone. This and the next 4 of the first 5 resolutions have to do with the picture you're seeing on the screen, which is the South Riverfront redevelopment project to relocate South Refuse, which you see along the river, off that site and clear it and then develop it for a port facility. And the blank ground off to the left is where part of South Refuse will relocate to. And the engineer for the whole project is HDR. And we've had several amendments to their contract. In the last one, we were adding $99,000 for additional services, but there was a typo that had incorrectly summed up the total not to exceed amount. So the purpose of this resolution is to get us to the correct amount, which is now $1,512,870.52. So each amendment has been approved so that each addition to the original contract has been approved. It's just the final sum was wrong. So the purpose of this amendment is to amend resolution, the last one, 2411, that approved resolution number 4. So I'm sorry for that clerical error that was in the last resolution.
Okay. And just for everyone's clarification, because this confused me at the outset when this first came in front of us, but the Dog Pound is an internal name to this site. It's not a Humane Society related location.
I was going
Correct?
to ask about that because I have a strong affection for dogs, and I was wondering what was going on with
It's the city pound and it was shut down under the Slay administration.
Okay.
That's correct. And so those vacant parcels off to the left in the drawing that you see, we just took to calling the Dog Pound site because the Dog Pound itself was just at the top of that picture, just a little bit out of the picture. But this is not a Humane Society project. That is correct.
So the building that you're referring to is the brown building with the 3 little black lines on it. Is that correct?
No, that's part of South Refuse. That is a former maintenance shed where mechanics would work on trucks. And those 3 black strips are clear story windows, skylights.
Oh,
Okay. So if you go to the left of that building, you see some empty ground. That's high ground.
okay.
And do you have the cursor? Yes. So right.
I don't think they can see the cursor. They're not gonna be able to see the cursor.
Oh, can you all see the cursor?
I did at one point, but I don't see it now.
If you can put it on the drawing.
I'm looking at it here, they can't see her.
Oh, okay. Okay, so anyway, the dog pound building, the old one that's been abandoned is under the RES of the word resolution 24 PT 19.
Okay, I see it now. It's on, well, it was on the train tracks, the cursor. So
Yeah.
you're saying to the left?
Yeah,
Dark mark.
Oh, I can see it when you're moving it.
Okay,
no, that's not it. Roland, can you move the cursor?
Well, just go ahead and describe where it is.
So anyway, it's at the north end. It's right there. Can you see the cursor now?
yeah, I can see it.
Okay, that's about where the dog pound building was, and
Okay.
it's gone. Or I'm sorry, the building is there, but the dog pound itself is relocated somewhere else in the city.
Okay.
So that's the site to which one of the buildings will move. But for this resolution, we just wanted to correct our inaccurate resolution 24 PT 11.
Very good. Any other questions for staff on this resolution? Hearing none, I'd entertain a motion to approve resolution 24 PT 18.
So moved.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. May we have a roll call vote, please?
Commissioner Miller,
Aye.
Commissioner Mason,
Aye.
Commissioner Kay,
Aye.
Alderman Cone,
Aye.
and Chair McBride.
Aye. And the motion passes and the resolution is approved. Moving on to resolution 24 PT 19, approving receipt of roughly $22,000 from the state professional engineering grant. Susan?
Every year, the state legislature gives a chunk of money to the port authorities collectively. And this year there was 400,000 in professional engineering grant monies. And at the meeting the port authorities had in June, we all agreed to split that pretty much equally. And so our portion of that grant is the $22,222. And so we are requesting approval to receive that grant and use it towards the South Riverfront redevelopment project.
And then on the attachment, it says it has allocation to each port, and then it has administration of the $400,000. Who's handling that pot of monies?
The Missouri Department of Transportation manages the flow of money from the state legislature to the ports. And so MoDOT has sort of rules that we have to follow, but they administer all the grants that come from the legislature to us. And so as you can see, we're one of 7 or 8 port authorities that got the 22,000 out of the, I'm sorry, 600,000 was the total.
Well, that's not my question. My question is, you allocated 200,000 among the various ports, and there's another 400,000 titled administrative grants for administrative needs.
Yes,
So
the port.
where's that going?
That's going to be the subject of the next resolution. We also get
Very good.
money from- Okay.
All right. So to be continued. Any
Okay.
questions for Susan on 19?
Could someone if we've talked about this before, please forgive me, but could somebody refresh my memory on the South Riverfront redevelopment project?
Yes, it's what's pictured on the screen. And so South Refuse occupies 11.6 acres along the river in the floodplain. And the goal is to eventually remove all the buildings and the functions so that the site can be developed into a port facility. So that's the South Riverfront redevelopment project. So what you're seeing there in the picture on the screen, the river runs across the bottom on the right. And the buildings that you see there all serve various functions for the South Refuse Division. The 2 smokestacks in the upper right have been demolished. They were abandoned. They were brick, and they were abandoned a couple of decades ago. So that's the project in the South Riverfront redevelopment project.
Thank you.
Sure.
Do we have interested tenants, or is that something we're not disclosing yet?
We have, later on, you'll see 3 letters of interest from shipping interests. So the building in the bottom left is a warehouse that's operated by Watco that we lease to them. They're very interested in that site. We also have letters of interest from Ingram and Oakley. They're both big barge lines that
Right.
move goods on the river. So it's, at the moment, it's city-owned property. Once we clear the site, we will put out an RFP and let the market tell us who wants to be there the most for a shipping business.
Got it. Thank you.
Any other questions on this resolution? Hearing none, I entertain a motion to approve resolution 24 PT 19.
So moved.
Is there a request for previous roll?
Yes. Request for previous role.
Do we have a second?
I'll
Second,
second.
Properly moved and seconded with request for previous roll. Is there any objection to that request? Hearing none, the motion passes and the resolution is approved. Moving on to resolution 24 PT 20, relating to administrative funding grant, which has been presaged by the previous resolution. Susan, you want to walk us through that, please?
Yes, same, slightly different process. We submit a checklist that MoDOT prepares, and that's one of your exhibits. And depending on your answers, you get more or less admin monies. And so this year, we're requesting approval to receive, to make the request for $20,028, $20,028.17. And it's the same process. MoDOT manages the distribution of those admin funds, and other ports get more depending on how they answer their checklist. Even though our administrative expenses are probably considerably higher. And so we use that to pay lawyers and engineers and those kinds of admin costs. We do not use them to pay our lobbyists. That is not allowed. So the purpose of this request or resolution is to allow us to request the money from the MoDOT and receive the grant per our request.
Very good. Any questions for Susan on this resolution? Hearing none, I'd entertain a motion to approve resolution 24 PT 20.
so moved.
Second.
Is there a request for
Request for
previous?
previous roll.
And properly moved and seconded with request for previous rolls or any objection to that request? Hearing none, the motion passes and the resolution is approved. Turning to resolution 24 PT 21, relating to ratifying a $700,000 freight enhancement grant application. Susan?
This is a slightly different pot of money that every year the legislature gives us money for capital improvements, but the MoDOT has a different grant process called their freight enhancement grants. It's not for roads, it's for anything but roads. And so the Port Authority applied for and received the maximum amount of $700,000, which we would like, it's FY25 money. So as soon as we get a funding agreement, we could have started spending it July 1st, but it's FY25, and the resolution is requesting ratification of the grant application. And then once we get the funding to use it towards the South Riverfront redevelopment project. And that 700,000, I can use 700,000 of our ARPA grant. So that's 1.4 million towards the South Riverfront redevelopment project. So the purpose of this resolution is to ratify the grant application and to authorizing the funding agreements and allowing us to spend it at the South Riverfront redevelopment project.
Good. We have any questions for Susan on this resolution? When would we expect to have, what's the status of the monies on this?
It's been awarded, it's been announced, and so we're waiting for the funding agreement from the state.
Okay,
Okay, and the 3 letters of interest are attached to this resolution from Watco, Oakley, and Ingram, if anybody would like to look at those.
very good. There are no questions from the commissioners, then I entertain a motion to approve resolution 24 PT 21.
So moved.
Requesting previous roll call.
Second.
And so they moved and seconded with the request for previous roll. Is there any objection to that request? Hearing none, the motion passes and the resolution is approved. Moving on to resolution 24 PT 22. Susan, can you walk us through that, please?
Yes, U.S. Department of Commerce has a subdivision called the Economic Development Administration, EDA. And EDA has a port improvement, public works kind of division, if you will. And we applied to them in 2009 and got 16 million towards the rebuild of the dock at the municipal river terminal. So now this is, some years later, we're applying to the same department for up to 2 million towards South Riverfront redevelopment project. And so EDA has a rolling grant application due date. We'd like to get it out, the grant application shortly so that we can, if we are successful, it would be FY25 money, which is a federal FY25. So we'd have until October 1st or September 30th to receive that money. If we get it. So the purpose of this resolution is to allow us to apply for that grant towards South Riverfront redevelopment project.
All right, and that grant just needs to be submitted prior to October 1, or when is the grant required to be submitted?
It doesn't have a due date because it's a rolling application. I think it's
Gotcha.
okay, but what I'd like to do is get it now so that I can start using it this fiscal year, this federal fiscal year.
Understood. Any questions for Susan on this resolution?
What's the budget for this project?
It's probably the the engineer is telling us to rebuild a new trash transfer building. It's going to be, they've dropped it a little bit. It's going to be 68 million. And so we have several million in hand. We have the 5 from the state. We have 5.76 million in ARPA funds. And then this past June, we applied for 2 more state grants, each one up to, it was $1 million. And we succeeded. That's not been officially awarded. So I don't want to count my chickens before they hatch, but I have 5.76 million in ARPA, and I have about 5 in state grants. Some already received and some spent and some coming.
Any matching grants?
Well, ARPA is kind of a matching grant. It's a 50-50 deal. So if I get $1 million from the state, I can use $1 million of the ARPA. So this EDA grant is 2 million. That would trigger 2 million from the ARPA 5.76 million. We've spent we're down to about 5 million left of the ARPA. And we have until November 1st of 26 to draw down all of that ARPA money. So now we're starting to really move.
And how long will it take you to complete this project?
The drawings are underway for the new trash transfer building. We should be about 30% complete by the beginning of next month, and then we review the cost estimates and things like that. We hope to go out to bid for the new trash transfer building in January or February of next year, and then that's about a year's worth of construction. So we're playing to that November 1st date to use all the ARPA money. So all of our money should be expended by November 1st, actually a couple months prior to that. We've got a few months kind of float in there. But the goal then is to then, once the trash transfer building is built on the high ground, is to relocate staff out of the existing trash transfer building, which is in the floodplain and does flood periodically, so that we can have a more environmentally sound and more efficient, the traffic layouts can be much better. So that's close to being, the design for that should finish up this fall.
Thank you.
Any other questions on this resolution? Hearing none, I'd entertain a motion to approve resolution 24 PT 22.
So moved with previous roll call.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded with a request for previous roll. Is there any objection to that request? Hearing none, the motion passes and the resolution is approved. I will take up resolution 24 PT 23, approving a Port Authority lease with the U.S. Coast Guard, I believe. Susan?
Yeah, the slide that we're about to show you has an incorrect address. It's not on 876 North First, it's 900 North First. So the building that the purpose of this resolution is to authorize the Port Authority to enter into a lease with the property owner so that we can issue an RFP for RFQ for an architect to do plans and specs to renovate the building per the Coast Guard's requirements. And we would then turn the property back over to the owner, who would then lease to the Coast Guard. So the property in question is a little building that you see. The Martin Luther King Bridge is just out of the picture off to the right. And you're looking north along First Street. And there's a parking lot just on the left of the building, which would be part of the project. And the goal is to renovate the building so that the Coast Guard could have a recruiting office there at that location. We have talked to the Coast Guard about this. They are interested in the building. We asked their real estate division person to come visit, which she did. And we also gave her a proposed layout. We gave her two, and she liked one of them in particular. So as we move forward with this project, we will constantly check in with the Coast Guard to make sure we're doing what would meet their recruitment needs. So it's they would have offices. Is there a second slide? The second slide is going to show you the layout that is proposed for this building. And it has offices. So there's the floor plan and some just imagined views. But as you can see, there are some offices off to the left. There's a kitchen and some bathrooms in the center. And then off to the right is an outdoor patio that the idea is to have recruits come in and talk to either superior officers or the recruiting people. We are going to ask SLDC if it's for their approval to use up to $50,000 in SLDC funds to pay for the architect to do the working drawings, the plans and specs that would be needed to get a permit to rehab the building. So the purpose of this resolution is to ask for approval to lease the property, it's vacant, obviously, from the property owner, and then go out for an RFQ for an architect. And we would come back with the design contract to the commission for the commission's review and hopefully approval before we proceeded with any renovations.
Very good. Well, I am heartened by the presence of the Coast Guard back on the landing. I think that's outstanding. I believe they're moving their offices from the county, if my memory serves, to come back into the city. So that's really great. And I think that's the result of some meetings that Neil Richardson has had with the Admiral of the Coast Guard down in New Orleans. But yeah, I think this is a very, very exciting development and can pave the way for additional coordination between the port and the Coast Guard. Any questions for Susan? Or I see President Richardson has unmuted himself.
Yes, I have, and my apologies for not being on camera. I'm traveling from another event, still in St. Louis. So
Right.
I just wanted to ensure that I provided a couple comments around the importance for this partnership, potentially with the Coast Guard and this building of significance as we're looking to, again, bring strength and stability back to Laclede Landing. As you all may be aware, SLDC in partnership with Greater St. Louis Inc. Has worked on a partnership to provide retail incentives. We have a new tenant that's potentially seeking to move in Laclede Landing, a retail tenant that will be utilizing the tenant improvement portion of the retail incentive program. But then also we provided a grant about $50,000 to Brew Tulum as they are moving back into the city and Laclede Landing. And so being able to have a quality tenant in the Laclede Landing neighborhood as we continue to create more vibrancy in one of the first neighborhood, in the first neighborhood of the city of St. Louis. This partnership with the Coast Guard is critical, bringing safety, bringing stability, and really showing the strength of that neighborhood by having a national military installation during recruiting there is important. But then also the reason that the Coast Guard is seeking to move into this space is because of the other investments that we've made that I've mentioned with the retail component. They're looking to increase their foot traffic and visibility of the Coast Guard. And so just going to show how the investments that we're making are creating compounded impacts on economic growth in that area. And I believe the Coast Guard will be part of future growth opportunities that will happen on the landing and across downtown St. Louis. So I just wanted to ensure the commission heard directly from me around the importance of this relationship and partnership with the Coast Guard. It's just not a simple transaction of a lease. It's about building a more safe, vibrant Laclede Landing neighborhood.
Outstanding.
Very good.
Any questions from the commissioners on this resolution? Alderman Cohen.
I do. So Susan, my apologies. You were breaking up a little bit during the presentation on my end. So who owns the building currently?
The building's privately owned by a real estate investment trust. It's called GLP Capital.
Okay, and so what is the intent of the resolution itself then? If we're just providing incentives to them at this point?
The resolution is asking your permission to lease the building for a nominal amount from the property owner and then turn around and put out an RFQ for an architect to do plans and specs for the renovation. So
the Port Authority is going to lease the building, put out an RFP for an architect, and then we're going to, with the intent of signing a sublease agreement with the Coast Guard.
No, we would return the building back to the property owner and the property owner would lease to the Coast Guard.
Is that in the, is there a legal document that requires the property owner to lease to the Coast Guard since we're putting in money?
At this point, there isn't, but we are talking to the attorneys for the property owner to have a funding agreement that says exactly that.
Exactly what Alderman Cohen said or what you said, Susan?
The funding agreement, I'll let our attorney address that.
Yes, so we are working out the terms of a lease agreement with the property owner. Alderman Cohen, to your point, there is not a legal document yet, but there certainly will be that will require the property owner lease to the Coast Guard. That is the whole purpose of doing this project. If that doesn't manifest, then there's no point in proceeding.
Right, so shouldn't that be reflected in the resolution?
Let's see. At the bottom of the executive summary, it says completion of the rehab will extinguish the authority's lease and GOP will lease the property to the Coast Guard.
But we don't have a legal document that,
That's correct. We do not have one yet.
But we will not enter into this agreement. I'm sorry, Alderman Cone, but we will not enter into this agreement without having that stipulated that the real estate investment trust will lease to the Coast Guard as a requirement of this arrangement. So you are correct that we don't have a legal agreement today, but this resolution allows us to enter into an agreement with that stipulated language within it.
On a lighter note, the historic like Budweiser sign that's out there, what's happening with that? Does it belong to the building owner? Does it belong to the previous business? Like, are we just going to trash it, or is it going to be part of a like rehab of the property?
I don't think it will be on the building once the Coast Guard is there, but I would hope we wouldn't trash it. That would be something that the property owner, I guess, would tell us one way or the other. I don't know who owns it. I would guess the property owner does.
I don't see why it couldn't be there while the Coast Guard is there, but you can always put additional signage on a building.
Well, this picture's 3 years old, so for all we know, it's not even there.
We will get back to you about that. Okay.
Thank you.
So I have a question, just to make sure I'm understanding everything correctly. The Port Authority is involved in it, sort of like the go-between, or are we're paying for or are giving funds to the architect to build the plans to rehab the building. And is that correct?
Yes, that SLDC has a board meeting next week. We will go to the SLDC board meeting and request approval to expend up to $50,000 towards an architect to do the plans and specs for the renovation.
And now it won't expand 50,000. I mean, do architectural plans cost $50,000?
We're going to issue an RFQ, and so the architects will tell us what they need to do the project. That's the money we have. If it's more or less than what we need, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. But what we need are drawings to get a building permit so we can do the rehab.
Right.
Hey, Rob, I see your hand raised. You might shed some light on Commissioner Mason's question.
Yeah, so these are professional services that do not allow for the Port Authority to seek bids for doing the work. It's a qualifications-based selection process. So through the RFQ, we will identify the firm that seems most qualified, competent, and able to deliver, the required drawings within a time frame that we're comfortable with. At that point, once the selection is made, negotiations will ensue as to what those appropriate fees are. It's hard to guess at this point exactly what that dollar amount is, but if it would exceed $50,000, that's something that certainly SLDC and others may address. And it's possible that the REIT that owns the property could also cover that difference.
I'm just concerned about architectural plans costing $50,000. That seems to be a little bit high, in my opinion, because I don't know what the square footage of the building is, but it doesn't look like it's that large, and it's for 2 floors. I just can't see that extending, and maybe it's just maybe it's just an amount and it's used for a certain purpose, but I hope that it wouldn't cost $50,000 to draw up plans.
So architectural fees are frequently, for estimating purposes, are a percentage of the cost of those improvements. And that's, industry kind of figures are around 8%. My opinion is 50,000 is probably a little bit on the low side, although I may be wrong because it may not require quite as much, renovation as what, given that it's going to be office and pretty straightforward, not looking for a lot of creativity here. But my
Right.
suspicion, it would be, if anything, it's going to be slightly more than 50. I don't think it's going to be a lot less than 50. If the cost of the improvements are, $500,000, 8% is, 40,000. So we're in the ballpark. But that's, I think, a little bit on the low side of what may be expected to be the cost for these improvements.
How many,
All just guesswork at this time.
do you know the square footage of the building?
Yes, it's a little under 4,000. It's 3,900 and something. It's a little under 4,000.
Okay, so my house is 4,000 square feet, and we didn't spend $50,000 on architectural fees.
This is,
And
this is an up to amount.
this is what?
An up to amount?
An up to amount, right? I understand that. My whole concern is, I just hope it's not up to that. When you say that that's kind of on the low side, I disagree with that. I think more money would go into renovating the building. I just don't see how all that money could go into just drawing up plans for it.
And Commissioner Mason, to your point, that's why we will have a RFQ and then the RFP process to get competitive bids. So it's not we're just selecting one entity, but it allows for us to have these funds set aside. So as we issue that RFQ and RFP, we're able to move forward with selecting a architect based on the competitive nature. And typically, we have basic qualifications, but if after we've assessed the qualifications of the firms, we typically go with the lowest bid after we've assessed the quality of what's needed here. So we will have a competitive process. So the market will determine, if it's 35,000, if it's 50,000, and so we will be able to make a determination from there. But to Chairman McBride's point, that's why we provided up to $50,000, so we're not having to come back again to ask for another 10,000. Once we get those bids in. And again, for the purpose of this resolution, is really for the lease, us to enter into a lease agreement at a nominal value. That $50,000 contribution will come from SODC, so that will be determined by the SODC board of directors on that contribution and commitment. But I do appreciate the comments and the diligence that's being had here around the need to ensure that we are paying market cost for these type of services.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I appreciate that you all will be good stewards of your funds and as you move forward on this project. Thank you.
Do we have any other questions or comments on resolution 24 PT 23? Hearing none, seeing none, I entertain a motion for approval.
So move with previous roll call.
Second.
Been properly moved and seconded with request for previous roll. Is there any objection to that request? Hearing none, the motion passes and the resolution is approved. All right, I believe that is the end of our agenda items. Now we're in open agenda. Do we have any reports from the staff or the president?
I don't know if Susan, you have any updates, but from my perspective, I think that I laid out some of the updates in my comments in regards to the Coast Guard. is that SLDC is continuing to partner with Laclede Landing and other areas, other neighborhoods within the Port District to support their initiatives and those efforts. And also the Laclede Landing Main Street recently hired their executive director that was funded by SLDC ARPA interest. So again, that while that's not direct port activity, it does support the neighborhoods that are within the Port District to continue to move and support economic growth within that district overall. So those are just my parting comments for today, Chairman McBride. I appreciate the opportunity.
Outstanding.
I
If
don't
there's
have any-
nothing else,
No, I don't have anything further, but we do have both of our federal and state lobbyists here.
understood. I see that Ms. Barget has turned on her camera, so I'll take that as a sign that you wish to go first. So Jackie, if you take it away.
Perfect. I thought I had my camera on this whole time as I'm staring at the screen too, so I apologize. But I don't know, I can't remember the last time that we spoke, so I'm gonna quickly kind of go over everything just to give you all a little refresher on where we're at with everything Missouri. But I hope you all had a good 4th of July. But session ended in May, and as you all recall, it was a very I always say every session contentious. I'm going to turn my camera off in case I'm freezing on you.
You are.
Can you hear me now?
I can
Yes.
hear you. We just can't-
Perfect. So
Oh,
just yell at me if I freeze and you can't hear me, but session was very, very contentious. There was a lot of controversy over passing legislation dealing with initiative petition reform in the Senate, which led to quite a bit of filibustering and lack of productivity, whether that's a good thing or not. We all can make our own decisions on that, but in the grand scheme of things, there were about 2,500 bills that were introduced this year, and only 27 legislative bills actually made it to passage. So that is the lowest number of bills that have ever passed before. Obviously, those 27 bills, as you all know, they're supposed to be single subject, but they get crammed together and end up being what we call Christmas trees. So they get smashed up with multiple provisions in them. That unfortunately for us, we were trying to pass a piece of legislation, did not bode well for us, but in the grand scheme of things, there were some good things that got passed. There were some good things that didn't get passed. I will just starting in the budgetary front, the legislature passed about a $52 billion budget this year. That is the biggest budget that the state has ever passed. Governor Parson last week released his budget signatures and vetoed about $1 billion of that. He referenced some concerns with some education legislation that was passed and not thinking that the state would be able to continue to fund that. So he thought he needed to make sure that the budget got trimmed down a little bit. There are a number of people that think there was just a big education package that was passed that increases teacher salaries, expands charter schools into Boone County area, and a few other what I as a non-education person, that just increases the cost of education in the state. And there wasn't a whole lot of dollars put behind that. So there are a lot of folks that think that they might end up having a supplemental budget or a special session to address those concerns sometime after the primary election. I'll say Governor Mike Parson, I think if his friend Mike Kehoe is elected, is going to want to make sure that he goes into office with the best budget and the most balanced budget as possible. So I think we might see that if Mike Kehoe wins the primary. If Jay Ashcroft or Bill Eigel win the primary, Mike Parson also has a good relationship with them, but it's not his good buddy. So we might not see a supplemental budget or special session get called then. But with that said, in the grand scheme of things, ports in general got our collective port funding that is put in House Bill 4, which is the MoDOT budget, received $11.6 million. As you all recall from last session, the legislature passed a change of statute to create a waterways and ports trust fund so that all of our collective funds could be put in there and would give us a little more grace period to make sure that we have that 2 years to spend that funding, just because of weather and different issues that come into play when we're trying to do developments. And there was a oversight in the legislation that accidentally excludes St. Louis Port Authority from accessing those funds. It says that you have to own or hold in long-term lease the land in the Port Authority for a port in order for a port to be able to receive those funds. So we had both Senator Steve Roberts and Representative Del Taylor from the city of St. Louis introduce legislation early on this session that would clarify and allow St. Louis Port Authority to access those funds. Both Susan and James put significantly more effort and work on this than I think they anticipated. It is such a simple fix, but we worked with a bunch of the other ports to make sure that they were okay with the language change that we were making. And after about a month and a half of going back and forth, everyone was on board, everyone was in favor of it. And legislators across the board were very, very supportive. Senator Jason Bean, who's a Republican from down in the Boot Heel, is very, very involved in ports and port activity, was very helpful to us. Representative Tim Taylor from just northwest of Columbia is another Republican that passed the legislation originally, was very helpful to us. But we unfortunately got tied up with another port issue that Representative Cindy Buckeye Courtway from Jefferson County was trying to pass. She was trying to eliminate any type of match that a port would have to make to MoDOT in order to make funds and expand kind of the breadth of projects that ports can use those state funds for, which in the grand scheme of things, I don't think any port, it kind of gives us more freedom, but there was a lot of pushback that our legislation got tied to, and ultimately was the reason that our standalone bill that got pushed, we got it voted out of the House unanimously, which is unheard of, honestly. So it was unfortunate that it got tied to that legislation, but also the just significantly low amount of bills that passed didn't give us any avenues to add our legislation to at the end of session. So moving forward next session to make sure that we don't end up in this same situation again, Susan has been working with Levi Woods, who oversees the waterways program at MoDOT. And we are going to ask him, when MoDOT makes their request to the governor for their budget requests, they have to submit those in October, to put a separate line item for St. Louis Port Authority that is outside of the Waterways and Ports Trust Fund, so that if for some reason we have another session that turns into not a whole lot of legislation passing, that we still have those funds line itemed out there. We also are going to have both Senator Steve Roberts and Representative Del Taylor from the city of St. Louis reintroduce those bills. And we have also asked Republicans, Senator Jason Bean and Representative Tim Taylor, to introduce the bills as well. So it is a bipartisan front when those are pre-filed in December. Moving on from I don't know if you all have any questions about that, just the waterways and ports, before I go into some of the other stuff that was discussed, that it just impacts St. Louis in general. Because
I think you can proceed.
Okay. Well, the only other stuff that was passed that impacts the port, there is a bill that it expands the state auditor's ability to, I'm using the word probe, but to look into political subdivisions and how they operate across the board. It doesn't give him some crazy amount of power, but it does increase what he can do. So just, I want to make sure you all are aware of that. That was House Bill 2111. Susan, I know you guys have it and have seen it. There was a big public safety bill that was passed, sponsored by Senator Tony Lukemeyer from over in the Kansas City area. It had a number of issues, nothing specific to St. Louis in there, but it did have the Blair's Law legislation that I know a lot of people are very familiar with, that criminalizes celebratory gunfire when people are shooting guns in the air at 4th of July, which I think that was a big win for a lot of people, especially the young girl Blair who died because of it. But then just the other two big things that impact St. Louis that I'm sure you all hear about all the time are the earnings tax legislation and St. Louis police control. Neither of those passed the legislature this year. The earnings tax, obviously with the court decision that came down requiring refunds to be made, I think that has taken a lot of the big push from some of the legislatures in the surrounding areas from introducing as many bills as they have in the past. It will still be introduced next year, and I will just in general keep you guys updated on it, but that did not pass. And then the St. Louis police control, just so you all know, there are a lot of discussions over that. It did not pass. I know Senator Carla May has been very vocal about not letting that pass the legislature in its current form, but there are discussions going on between the St. Louis POA, some of the big stakeholders like the Rexing Fields of the world on if there is some other kind of alternative method out there that would make everyone that's not the full-blown state control, but maybe something in the middle ground. And Senator Cindy O'Laughlin, who's the floor leader, has been very vocal about trying to have those conversations. And then the only other thing, just so you all are aware, obviously there are 6 initiative petitions that will be on the ballot coming up. And if you guys have any questions about theirs, they range from minimum wage to abortion rights to sports wagering, putting a new casino at Lake Ozark. I think there's an election one too on there. But I won't go into any of the election stuff going on, and I'm sure you're about to get bombarded with commercials and radio ads and signs everywhere you go, but do not hesitate to reach out if you ever have a question about someone or want a very unbiased outline on someone's background or anything.
Outstanding. I appreciate it, Jackie. Any questions for Ms. Barget? All right, thank you. And we also have Chris Johnson on the line, our federal lobbyist. Chris, do you have any updates for us?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Are you able to hear me okay?
We are.
Yes.
Very good. Well, let me start with giving a congressional update, and then I'll get into some specifics about things we have been doing specifically for the Port of St. Louis. So Congress is in session through early August. They will take the month of August off and come back in September. As you know, the federal fiscal year runs through September 30, and as of now, Congress has not passed any of the spending bills for the next fiscal year 2025, which starts on October 1. We hope and expect that they will, in September, pass some sort of stopgap spending measure that will keep the federal government running. And the expectation is they will do that and set a date, or they'll fund the government through some date in late November or December, past the federal elections in November, and that they'll come back into a lame duck session and hopefully pass the permanent appropriations bills or spending bills. The importance of all of that to St. Louis is, of course, that we very much want the Coast Guard, the Corps of Engineers, and the Maritime Administration, and the agencies, the federal agencies that the port interacts with, to be fully funded and operational. Our expectation is that all of those agencies will be funded, but given all the partisanship in Washington and the fact that we're in election season, it's a little hard to predict. We'll keep you all posted, but hopefully we won't have any sort of government shutdown in October as a lead into the federal elections in November. So that's just a quick update on Congress. Turning to some of our activities focused on St. Louis, we have worked very closely with Susan, President Richardson, and many of our friends at the Coast Guard, including Admiral Barata, who President Richardson or the chairman mentioned earlier. Admiral Barata runs the 8th Coast Guard District out of New Orleans, and he is a big fan of St. Louis and is very supportive of increasing the Coast Guard's presence in and around St. Louis. And so we've coordinated with him and others in the Coast Guard with regard to the recruiting center and the resolution that you all passed earlier. But I would just generally say that the relationship between St. Louis and the Coast Guard has been significantly strengthened in the last year, and there are hopefully bigger and better things and more investments that we're going to see from the Coast Guard as a result of the outreach there. The other item that we have been working on diligently with Susan and others is the South Riverfront redevelopment project that Susan reported on. We have been working with the Economic Development Administration, or EDA as they're often referred to, which is part of the Department of Commerce in Washington, and working with them on potential funding for this project. We're also looking at other potential sources of funding from the EPA and a little bit further down the line, funding from the U.S. Maritime Administration. So I'll stop there, but that gives you a brief summary of what we've been working on, and obviously I am happy to answer any questions that any of you all might have.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Do we have any questions from the commissioners? I see none. We appreciate the hard work that both you and Ms. Barget do on our behalf. Unless there's anything else from the commissioners, though, then we have concluded our agenda. Hearing and seeing none, our next meeting is scheduled for August 8, 2024. At this time, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. Excuse me, second.
Moved and seconded. We are adjourned. Thank you all.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.